The Rebbe begins in this 10th chapter that when man sha'adam magbir nafsho l'kis, when he intensifies, strengthens his godly soul, v'nilcham kol kach im habahamis, and fights so strongly with the animal soul, at shemegarish u'mevayir harasha bo michol asmali, till he chases away and he consumes or he eradicates the evil which exists within it from the left side. Like it says a pasuk in the Torah that you should eradicate the evil from your midst, and in this case he is completely the individual with his determination is completely or triumphs to a great extent. They gets rid of all evil, and if you note over here, you see Michal Hasmali. That was the position of the animal soul. It's in the left side of the heart, where there's a concentration of blood. Again, we elaborated on this in the previous chapter. And he gets rid of it to the extent that he eradicates the evil within his midst, based on the pasuk. So apparently, it seems like he's a great guy over here, doing a great job. Let's call him the tzaddik. And the Rebbe says, yes, he is a called tzaddik. Yet, he's called a tzaddik she'ein gomor. He's called an incomplete tzaddik. Why? Because ve'ein haram nepach l'teiv mamash. The evil was not completely transformed to something, to positive energy. And hence, therefore, he's called tzaddik she'ein gomor, a tzaddik which is incomplete tzaddik, v'tzaddik v'raloi, and he's a tzaddik v'raloi means that based on the explanation on the very first chapter of the Gemara in Brachas, in the Tractate Brachas, and the Gemara deals with different levels, these 5 different levels, the 2 levels of the Rasha v'tovlo, Rasha v'ralei, Tzadik v'tovlo, Tzadik v'ralei, and then it says Ubeinani, and the Beinani, the one in the middle, and there the Gemara translates it. Or let's look at the simple meaning of the simple translation of the Gemara. The simple meaning of the Gemara is that there is individuals, tzaddikim rather, that they have a good life in this physical world. There's the tzaddik which has a difficult life in this physical world. That's the literal meaning of tzaddik v'toiv loi, tzaddik v'ralei. He's a tzaddik v'toiv loi. He's experiencing good. Tzaddik v'ralei is a tzaddik which doesn't experience pleasantness in this world, and the Gemara says why. And then conversely, the Rasha, there's the Rasha which v'toiv lei, which we many times so identify with, that the Rasha, things are good for him in this world, and there's the Rasha v'ralei, things are not good for him in this world, and then Beinani needs someone in between. So the Gemara says that the reason why the tzaddik v'toiv loi, the tzaddik and he's experiencing good in this world, is because the tzaddik gomer is a complete tzaddik. The tzaddik which doesn't experience toiv, good in this world, pleasantness in this world, is because the tzaddik she'ein gomer is an incomplete tzaddik. Meaning, and again, we spoke about this in length in the first chapter, the whole point of punishment of person experiencing negative experiences, maybe in this world or the world to come, there's something on the overall which has to be cleansed, and no one should ever dare say they understand perfectly the system, how it works. So we're going to talk about it conceptually, because we our knowledge is almost probably nil. Exactly understand how Hashem judges the world or individuals, etc. But we're going to again talk about this conceptually. Every retribution is ultimately a cleansing. It cleanses the certain stains of the neshama which has been accumulated over the years, or the person's investment in things which he should have not invested in. Again, call it sin or any type of misconduct. The point of any retribution, punishment, is there to cleanse in that. So when you see a tzaddik, Gemara says, you see a tzaddik v'tevla that he has good in this world, it means it's a tzaddik gomer is a complete tzaddik. Because for a tzaddik, the true schar, the true reward is not in this world. He understands that in the world to come, the reward is infinitely greater than this world. and Hashem has it all. If Hashem has decided to give a tzaddik, or decides to give a tzaddik his reward, certainly is going to give the reward. He has the reward shamor, it's guarded for the tzaddik in the world to come. So when you see a tzaddik additional to his reward, which is guarded for him in the world to come, which he can await from the world to come, he sees he has a pleasant time in this world. The Gemara says he's a complete tzaddik. There's nothing to cleanse him. There's nothing, no retribution for him. There's no point of doing that he should experience anything negative, because it's a complete tzaddik. That's what the Gemara says. When you see a tzaddik v'rala, you see that he's having difficulties. The taiv, in other words, that reward, the ultimate reward, is waiting for him in the world to come, and the Eibishter is just taking away, washing his neshama, cleansing his neshama in this world, which we know that, and just like it's on the positive side, it's infinitely greater in the world to come. Similarly, in the negative side, that is, it says many svarim that a person suffers in this world, it is infinitely less the pain, again, of suffering in this world, the world to come. So Hashem looks at the tzaddik and says, I want to give him the real, infinite, eternal reward, but because there's some stains he has in this, and therefore Hashem says, I'm going to take off the stains in this world. And that's why he doesn't experience a pleasant life in this world, in order that he should have a clean, neat reward in the world to come. So this is the Gemara says, because he's a tzaddik v'rala, he's an incomplete tzaddik, there's something has to be cleansed in his neshama. So therefore Hashem said, and therefore we see that he experiences some negative experiences in this world, as opposed to somebody who is tzaddik v'tayvlei. There's no point of cleansing him because he has no ra. This is the simple meaning. And the same thing with the rasha. Exactly the same thing with the rasha. Again, as we elaborated then, and then the Beinoni, the one who's in between. But here the Alter Rebbe teaches, or even in the first chapter, he says there's another pirush, that tzaddik v'rala is not referring to the experience of the individual. If he's experiencing rav, he's experiencing tov, he's experiencing good or evil. Tzaddik v'rala is part of the definition of the tzaddik, that he's an incomplete tzaddik. And how do you translate v'raloi? Again, not like the simple meaning v'ra, his experience is ra, but this is part of the definition who he is, that he has a bit of ra, he has a bit of evil, but loi, it's completely bent in, means to say it's overwhelmed by the tzaddikness, by the good which he acquires and possesses, that it's loi, which means it's just kind of, it's submitted. It stands in total submission to the overwhelming taiv good which he has. In other words, that is part of who he is, not of his experience. So the literal meaning of the Gemara is that taiv and rale is part of it, is how they experience their experiences in this world. While the pirush that Alter Rebbe gives over here is, of tzaddik v'rale, it's part of who he is. He's an incomplete tzaddik. So, firstly, he's a tzaddik. Primarily, he's a tzaddik. V'ra, a little bit of ra that he has, a little bit of evil that he has, is loi, which means it's stands a complete submission to the tzaddikness which he possesses. That good, that overwhelming good which he possesses. Take, for example, you have a full bottle or a barrel of water, and you put in a speck of coffee. You can't say there is no coffee there, because there is. You put in the coffee, it's for sure there. The only thing is, it's so overwhelmed by the water that you don't even see the coffee. So it's so minimal that loi means to say it stands kind of, this coffee stands in submission, if you want to use the same terms over here, to the overwhelming majority of water, to the extent you can't even see the coffee. That is the definition of the tzaddik she'eini gomer. He's incomplete. But tzaddik v'raloi, he's called tzaddik v'raloi because even that little ra that he has is loi. As it says, sheyesh beyadayin mat mizeira, and the Alter Rebbe describes it. He got rid of it, but the enemy didn't become an ally. And if you think about it on practical terms, when you could say somebody who lives a yid, and his neshama invested in his physical flesh and blood, and you could say that he got rid of the evil, he has no inclination, at least overtly, not to think anything negative, not to speak anything negative. There's not even any energy, not that he's fighting anything. When you say he got rid of the evil, it means to say that he doesn't have anything on himself, any even temptation, not to speak lashon hara, not to think anything inappropriate, not to do anything inappropriate. And on the contrary, he's driven to mitzvahs. He's never laid back or lazy or or has to think twice to do the best in his thought, speech, and action, again on the positive side, to learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, and to do kindness, etc. It's unusual. If you see someone like that, please present it to me. I'd like to see who this person defined as a true tzaddik. Tzaddik is not a label. I'm the tzaddik, or the tzaddik adar. It's not a label which 100 people can say on a person. Just means it has to be true. When you say someone's a tzaddik, and the way the Alter Rebbe describes the tzaddik over here, it's not like someone has a certain type of hat, for example, makes him a tzaddik. A tzaddik means that he got rid of the evil. It's not as simple. It's something very special. Let's not, even though the Rebbe says this person is eini gomor, he's incomplete, but let's understand, you're dealing with some very special person, that he is an individual that he truly got rid of the evil. He doesn't have any overt interest in doing, thinking, or speaking anything evil, and his sole interest is in doing, thinking, and speaking only good, positive, godly, and Torah. The problem, so why is he incomplete? The problem is that the ally has not, the enemy is not being transformed to an ally. What's the problem of enemy not being transformed to an ally? So firstly, the Alter Rebbe, let's see what the Alter Rebbe says. Tzaddik v'rali, he says the way we, just to see it inside, in the text, in this particular description, sheyesh be'adayin mat mizeira, he has a bit of evil. B'chol ha'smali, the left side, elishu kafo fu batul l'tayv, it's completely stands in submission, and is completely nullified l'tayv, to the good, to the overwhelming tzaddikness. Remember, he's called it tzaddik machmas mi'utze, because it's so minimal, the evil is so minimal, so it's completely batul, nullified to the good. Therefore it appears to him, it seems like to him he chased away the evil, and the evil has gone kuli legamre. It appears on the surface, like we said before. If you put a speck of coffee in a barrel, or even a bottle of water, you don't see the coffee, and you take an innocent person and say, what's in this barrel, or what's in this bottle? He's going to say, only water. Because the speck of, or this bit of coffee is so nullified to the water, you don't even notice the coffee. Similarly, it appears maybe even to others, and even to the person himself, he feels he got rid of this evil completely. Now maybe he did. Who says he didn't? The answer is, as we spoke about, we mentioned in the previous chapter, the Yetzer Hara, when the Torah says V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, you should love the HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all your heart, including the Yetzer Hara. It's not only that you just shun the Yetzer Hara, you stamp him out, you cancel him, you step on him, etc., but ultimately means Hashem says love HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Yetzer Hara, which means that the heart is completely transformed. As we mentioned this expression, when the enemy becomes an ally, then you know that you completely fulfill this mitzvah of V'ahavtas Hashem, love Hashem with all your heart, which means that in the Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, or the Yetzer Hara, like the expression of the Mishnah, loves Hashem. So when you shun the Yetzer Hara, you cancel it, you eradicate it. In a sense, there's some energy still there. The fact that there's some energy within you that exists but does not love Hashem, we must say there's something in its core, in its essence, still remained. And if it remained, not necessarily it's going to pop up, and it's going to kind of take control, because we're still dealing with a tzaddik, and it's a permanent term in this individual. He is and remains a tzaddik. The question is he completely clean, or everything about him is godly? The answer is no, because he did not transform the evil, as Alter Rebbe says it very clearly. And I mention this because it's not just something, use terms, shun it or transform it. The Alter Rebbe explained what the Nefesh Bahamis is. Ultimately, it's a source of energy. The question is what kind of warhead you put on it. It ultimately could be driven to understand and appreciate and perceive and appreciate and live and love godliness. And that is the ultimate mandate, and that is what the godly soul wants. So the idea of the enemy becoming a ally is part of the mandate of the Yid in this world, ideally, conceptually. So the fact that Ubi'arta, in this case, he eradicated the evil, we must say that even it seems to him by Gashay Veilach, that he chased it away and it's gone, but The answer is, the fact is that if he was completely triumphed in this challenge, the Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh Bahamis, this enemy would have indefinitely become an ally. The fact that it didn't shows that somewhere in its core, in its essence, it still remains. As Alter Rebbe concludes this statement here, Aval be'emes, truly ilu cholav v'halach legamri. If it was completely gone, all the evil which existed within him, it would have been completely transformed to good. And because it was not transformed to good, so he's still classified as a tzaddik, but still verale tzaddik, she'ein gomer, incomplete tzaddik. Did you want to ask something? No.
Yeah, is it possible for ordinary people to aspire to that level?
Of the tzaddik.
Well, yeah,
great question.
Where you can really transform that. How does one go about it?
Right. Good question. I must tell you, regrettably, there's going to be we will need a little bit patience. Patience, I would say, 1, 2, 3 chapters will clarify this question. So on the surface, I could go and answer you, but the picture will become not only clear, but crystal clear in the next 3 chapters, another including this one, Yud Yud Aleph Yud Beis. And so I suggest we just play it out, and because we really have to find ourselves in the picture. Ultimately, can a regular average person become a tzaddik? And that's why I say, bring me the person. I want to see the person who he has his 2 feet on the ground, and he got rid of his evil. He has no evil at all. It's something seems like unrealistic, right? We can understand someone who maintains some type of challenge. He's challenged with the evil. It means he has evil within him, even overt evil, to do, to think, to speak contrary to what Hashem wants, but he overcomes. In other words, he fights the battle that this motivation, or the signal which the heart is sending to the thought, speech, and action, he knows where to stop it in order that it should not enter into thought, speech, and action. In other words, he should on the ground. In other words, I say on the ground where Torah deals with. If you notice, the significant majority of the Torah deals with our thought, speech, and action, much more than what's going on in our heart. Yes, the Torah says love Hashem with your heart, and more so the Torah is ultimately telling us to love Hashem with our animal soul, their Yetzer Hara. But on the surface, the significant majority of Torah means to deal with thought, speech, and action. But over here, so there you could say you find many people who are in constant struggle, and much of the time, or majority of the time, maybe all the time, even all the time is something also something very special, that they're able to control the signal which comes from their heart, that an evil or negative signal which comes from the heart, in order to trigger their mind, the thought, their action, to speak, think, or do contrary to what Hashem wants, and to make sure that it remains clean. And it's similarly on the positive side, the heart says no, be laid back, don't be so excited about doing the mitzvah, or do it, even when you do it, don't be so excited doing it perfectly, and learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, but I'm going to overcome that. That's not the tzaddik, because then you cannot say that he eradicated the evil. Because this description, as special as it sounds, in the end of the day, there's a whole bubble of evil which is constantly bothering the person needs to overcome it. You know what I'm saying? This description which we just gave, as special as it sounds, and Alter Rebbe is going to really point out, really that is our mandate, that we should not think that our primary job is to conquer the heart. In other words, that our heart should start loving Hashem. We would be realistic. This is our ultimate mandate. But to say to someone's going to start as Avodas Hashem, he's going to say, I really want to become an Oved Hashem, someone who serves God, and my heart is definitely there's bubbling in a different direction, and I'm going to say, no, really, I only love you, Hashem. He's kind of lying to himself. We all know it, that we have our challenges, not only on hourly basis, many times on minutely basis, secondly basis, maybe millisecondly basis. We walk in the street to keep a pure mind and thought and speech and action is something that we're all challenged. The fact that we're challenged, why are we challenged? By definition, when we say challenged, means there's something bubbling within our heart to say, look or do or think something opposite when the Torah tells us to, and we have to overcome. So that's very far from the tzaddik. It's a great picture, and this is ultimately the way we begin. Again, this is all going to unfold, and we're going to need to find ourselves, not a need to find. Alter Rebbe is telling us, for that matter, he called the Sefer Shel Beinanim, the Sefer of the intermediate, means to say that initially we have to know that we cannot jump or not to believe or not to kid ourselves that we're going to start Avodas Hashem. I'm becoming the tzaddik. I'm going to cancel the whole natural me. It's just unrealistic. I mean, if unrealistic, not only because we're going to learn how unrealistic. Let's face it. Our mandate is to be a Beinoni. We're going to see how that works also. The Torah says ultimately be a tzaddik. How can we say be a Beinoni? But let's understand who the Beinoni is. It's a very special person. That somebody, the Alter Rebbe even says later, I don't want to jump the gutter over here, someone never sinned and never will sin. He's someone completely pure of sin, but he's not the tzaddik. He's far from the tzaddik. The fact that he's constantly overcoming this desire, his negative desires, that shows that he still has negative desires. So he's not the tzaddik. As
He's below the imperfect tzaddik.
He's below the imperfect tzaddik. Absolutely, yes. So here, what the healthy thing is, Alter Rebbe gives the introduction of the tzaddik v'tovla and tzaddik v'rali, and conversely the rasha v'tevla, rasha v'rali. In the next perek gives the clarification to the subsequent perek, which you're going to see, which begins with Beinoni, and Alter Rebbe spends 3 full chapters describing the Beinoni in 12, 13, and 14, and explains us again. This is a realistic, honest steps in our Avodas Hashem to understand that when we begin our Avodas Hashem, we have to try to be the Beinoni, and again, the Beinoni itself, Alter Rebbe describes as someone who never transgressed. So what's the difference on the surface of him and the tzaddik? The tzaddik doesn't even have the interest to transgress. The Alter Rebbe says over here, he eradicated the evil. It means to say, if someone eradicated the evil, he walks in the street, he has no evil within him to say, look there, hear that, think that, because he got rid of the evil. That means he eradicated it. So therefore, if we're only realistic with ourselves, we realize that in a sense we dare take the term tzaddik or place it on this, or at least initially in our initial Avodas Hashem, or even way into our Avodas Hashem, understand the term tzaddik is something extremely special, and if we're only honest with ourselves, I don't think the average person would ever think or to convince himself that he's even close to be called a tzaddik, because a tzaddik means someone who eradicated the evil. And again, on practical terms, means one has no evil. It's like an angel in a sense, right? An angel has no Yetzer Hara. He has no Yetzer Hara. He's not inclined. He has no struggles. An angel has no struggles to serve Hashem. He has no struggles to tell himself, no, I'm not going to do that because that's an Aveda. These are struggles, again, that don't come once once a year. They can come once in a millisecond if we're only honest with ourselves. In the 24 hours, how many challenges we have in order to be aligned with Ratzon Hashem, because there are signals within us that are telling us, do not, or do chas v'shalom the opposite. Yes, we can overcome them and control ourselves, but that's not the tzaddik which completely eradicated his evil. The pasuk says of Yirat Tahara. The question is now, why isn't he a tzaddik gomer? He eradicated the evil because ideally eradicating the evil is ve'ahavtas Hashem lekecha, that the enemy becomes a complete ally and loves Hashem. In this case, he shunned it, he crushed it, he got rid of it, and it is not transformed. So a tzaddik he is, but a tzaddik gomer he's not. Okay? Now the Alter Rebbe is going to say, go back to the Tzaddik Gomer. Tzaddik Gomer, which is the second level, or rather the first, but Alter Rebbe it clarifies the Tzaddik Gomer based on what he explained about the Tzaddik, incomplete Tzaddik. Tzaddik Gomer, the evil is not, again, crushed or eradicated, it's completely transformed to good. Therefore it's called Tzaddik V'Toivloi, that it's all about good. And how is it good? Like we said, that he takes away the garments, and we use the expression the war caps because we mentioned that the Nefesh Bahamis is a bubble of energy, and all depends where you're going to guide it to, what kind of garments you're going to allow on this energy, we use the word missile and a warhead, right? On this enormous energy, what kind of garments are you going to place? If you're going to leave any negative garments, it's definitely going to be inclined to things which are negative. The Tzaddik Gomer removed all those unclean, let's use the expression, unclean garments. In other words, it removed the unclean warhead from this energy. So if we removed it, what is the energy? The energy is right now channeled and guided to love Hashem. That is, i.e., the Nefesh Bahamis is loving Hashem, Beit Zahar is loving Hashem. So it means he got completely rid of the unclean garments, Mehara, which again is associated with evil. Dahainu, the Tzadik Lima Ismail B'Tanugil Haza. He's disgusted with worldly pleasures, and Alter Rebbe makes it clearly, to derive pleasure, again, in humanly pleasures, but to fulfill the temptation, the lust and temptation of the body, not for the service of Hashem. It doesn't mean the tzaddik is biting into stones instead of an apple, but everything the tzaddik does, he finds he always looks for, and it's really not only looks for it, but it's part and parcel of who he is, that everything has a godly purpose. When it comes to worldly pleasures, for the sake of worldly pleasure, not for the sake of solely for the sake of worldly pleasure, the tzaddik not only stays away from it, but he's abhorred from it. He's disgusted with it. That is the definition of love to Hashem. That is the definition that the Nefesh Bahamis Yetzer Hara is loving Hashem. You cannot, by definition, love one thing and its opposite, and the antithesis to it. If it's God, it's God. If it's anything antithetical to God, you cannot. Someone could do something to opposite actions or two opposite steps, but he cannot love something. You cannot love something which is opposite than this. In this case, for example, you cannot love God and something which is antithesis to God.
But what if there are allowable pleasures of this world?
Okay.
Made those pleasures.
Very good. So right. This sounds a little bit too strict, right? Too strict in the game. So let's understand this over here. Okay, let's understand this over here. First, let's find the words of the Alter Rebbe. The words of the Alter Rebbe says. Okay, so let me just say this. We're coming from to try to get the flow over here. We understand that one can do something, right? I could make sure that to stay clean with one hand and put my hand into something which is opposite, and clean something which is dirty, muddy, and so on. Because action, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, so many times the external reflects the internal, but it's still possible because ultimately it's external actions. When you're dealing with love, right? You cannot love two teams, or you cannot be driven. Your heart cannot be driven to things which are opposite. It can't, because if it's true love, it's genuine love to God, you cannot have that same genuine love to something which is opposite. It is ungodly. Not only not godly, but something ungodly, which is complete total opposite. In a war, you want one. Usually, the average person, especially if it's his country, he cannot be driven that his team should win or his country should win, and the same drive that his country should lose, that the other country should. Because if you have your heart and soul in the matter, you cannot have your heart and soul in two opposite areas. It's impossible. Okay? So when you're dealing with somebody who loves Hashem indefinitely, with absolute love, so he cannot have any drive or any love to something which is antithetical to godliness. Now, what is antithetical to godliness? Come to your question over here. Is, if you notice, Alter Rebbe doesn't say, and that's why I said the tzaddik doesn't look to chew on dry grass as opposed to a very clean, normal-looking apple, which answers your question as well. The tzaddik doesn't look to chew on dry grass because that's going to satisfy his body, and as opposed to a good apple. That's not the normal tzaddik. In this case, if you look clearly at the words of the Alter Rebbe, he says that for this, because ultimately when a tzaddik eats an apple, or maybe the way we should also eat apple, every apple has a certain taste. But how does a yid eat an apple? That apple is going to break my hunger. Or let's say in the context of Avodas Hashem, I want to learn some Gemara, I want to learn some Tanya, I want to learn some Halacha. I'm hungry, so I'm going to take the apple, it's going to satisfy me. I'm calm, so I'm going to open up for the next 15 minutes and learn Halacha, as an example, right? So when you ate the apple, there's a godly purpose in that apple, and here so it's not that you're negating the taste of the apple. The Alter Rebbe says, look at the expression. Bilvad means solely for the pleasures of man. Solely for the pleasures of man means it's completely devoid of any purpose or any purpose or objective and goal. That means solely for the pleasure of man. There's people who pleasure for the sake of pleasure is definitely ungodly. I love the apple without any purpose. Ideally, you don't have a purpose in life. Even if you want to look at it from the secular point of view, I took a break from my work, my intense meeting, which is going to make me a lot of money the next half a day. I took an apple to eat it. The average person could appreciate the apple, but his mind is not only on the taste of the apple, because then that's pure expression of animal, if you will. You look at the animal, he likes something what he eats without a purpose, right? Is it particularly bad? There's no alliance with with godliness. Even when he doesn't have in mind to gore another animal 5 minutes later, or even he doesn't have anything in his mind to do something with purpose, to plow the field or to do any other work, just in his mind, the mind of the animal, just to derive pleasure. So if you're dealing with an animal which doesn't have any purpose, I mean, he does have a purpose to do good things and to bring good to his owner as well, but in his mind, he has no purpose, so there's nothing godly about it. If there's nothing godly about it, the tzaddik abhors it. The tzaddik is disgusted. He is such a godly and a passionate, godly person. So anything which just doesn't have any purpose, it's something which he's discussing with. So again, I can say this example in something secular, not even Jewish, for example. He stops for his lunch break or for his snack break because he knows that he needs energy in order to make money in the next half of the day. So the apple. So again, he's also not eating grass or stones. He appreciates the apple, but as he appreciates the apple, he kind of sinks into the appreciation of the apple, or his mind is on something purposeful which he's going to do in the second half of the day. The answer is the latter. So if you find it, even in the secular point of view, if you look at the life of the tzaddik's true life is Torah, mitzvahs, God, and godliness. So the tzaddik should just derive pleasure from the apple just because it tastes good. It's something which is it's so essentially negated in the life of the tzaddik. So if you say that Hashem put in this world things which taste good, sure, the tzaddik again, he's not going to eat dry grass, he's going to eat the apple. But solely for the purpose of Levad? No. He will always find the Avodas Hashem, the service of God, in every bite he takes, or everything he consumes, he eats, or any interaction in this physical world. Even where there exists, by definition of its taste, etc., pleasure, but his mind is an Avodas Hashem. And because he knows ultimately, if it's devoid of Avodas Hashem, like we said, where does the animal soul come from? Even the neutral klipa, it's primarily and overwhelmingly klipa and sitra achra. In other words, it's energy, it's tumah, impurity. So it's not the lower level of impurity. But if it's just for the sake of pleasure, and even for that matter, say even more than that. We said in the previous chapters, if someone does something without a godly purpose, yes, he even takes that apple and he could bring that apple down to the level of shalosh klipos atzmeis, the lower level of impurity. So for that matter, it works in the same, and again, it's a kind of catch-22 also. If there is no godly purpose, so firstly, the apple doesn't have anything godly to it, but more so, we learned in the previous chapters, if someone has no godly purpose to his eating as an example, so the eating itself is brought down to the lower levels of shalosh klipos atzmeis. So if it's associated with impure forces, which is again the antithesis to God and godliness, the tzaddik is disgusted with it. As opposed to if he eats the apple, he can have pleasure of the apple, and his mind is Avodas Hashem. So then the apple itself becomes like an oil karban, right? We learned that the apple itself becomes like a sacrifice. So it doesn't negate. To clearly answer the question, doesn't negate that we look for something which is tasteless. No, if this is the food Hashem gave us with His kindness, it has a good taste and it satisfies us, even our taste buds, etc. But because our overall interest is that we should be able to continue to live and to serve Hashem, So that itself becomes an Eilik Korban, it becomes a sacrifice to Hashem, and if it becomes a sacrifice to Hashem, it becomes holy. So again, the tzaddik will appreciate it as well. As opposed to bilvad. Bilvad means say just to fulfill the bodily desire. That's associated with klip and sitracha. So if it's associated with klip and sitrach, which means the impure forces, the tzaddik is disgusted with it. And here's really the catch. Whatever comes from the impure force, the tzaddik, the complete tzaddik, has a hatred to it, with the ultimate and maximum hatred. Why? Because of his great, passionate love to Hashem and Hashem's holiness, with great and intense love. I always think Kedusha is the tzaddik's holiness, or ultimately refers to Hashem's holiness. But either way, b'avarabba, with this great love, and b'ta'anugim. If we remember, we learned last week, there's a love which you're driven to something, and there's a love that you're there. In other words, you derive pleasure. And we said pleasure is not something that you're driving to something else. Pleasure is when you're there already. That's why the nature of pleasure is calm and cool, because this is already, you're in the experience. You're not driven to an experience, you're in the experience. That's why it's called Ava Rabba B'Tanugim. And this is the type of level, which is the higher level of Ava, which this Tzaddik V'Tevlei has. V'Chibu Yisera Hanal, and again in extra affection. As opposed to the Tzaddik She'eini Gomor, the incomplete Tzaddik he's not completely disgusted with the antithesis to Elokus. And a very classic example given. You could find two neat people, which again brings much clarity to these words of the Alter Rebbe. You find two neat people, very neat people, and they always like to dress always clean. They'll put on a garment, a shirt, it always has to be completely clean. And the same thing the other person. How do you know who's cleaner? And someone tells you one is cleaner than the other. One really is a cleaner person than the other. How could you tell? If initially they'll both go to their closet every single day, to their wardrobe, and put on the clean blouse or shirt or sweater, so how could you ever tell who's cleaner than the other? There's one way to tell. If at a time they're sitting in their office, as an example, and they're eating something, let's use the example, spaghetti and sauce, and something drips onto their garment, maybe on their sleeve or on any part of their garment. The true clean person cannot tolerate it. They would even make the effort to go home and change. I'm not going to give an extreme example. Let's say the homeless do. I'm giving you just a kind of overall example. The not such clean person, that little speck on the garment they can tolerate. They'll wait till they come home. Life can go on. The meetings can go on. Everything can go on to the rest of at least to the rest of the day with that little speck on the shirt. The true clean person, again, you don't know it on the surface when they both go ahead and always grab for the clean garment. But the one who's kind of obsessed with cleanliness, the smallest speck on their garment, they're beside themselves, they got to go change. So where do you know that of one being more obsessed with the cleanliness over the other? Not what they go ahead and they do in the first place. In other words, in the same thing with the tzaddik and the tevil and tzaddik v'tevil, they're both driven to God and godliness. And the same thing, where do you know between these two clean people? They're both, when they're active, and as they run away, they both go ahead and grab always the clean garment all the time. But where do you know who is more obsessed with cleanliness is when you look at the other way. When this garment will become a bit dirty, the other person, one, cannot stand it and cannot tolerate it, while the other could live with it at least at the end of the day. The same thing. When you're dealing with the tzaddik v'tevil, tzaddik v'ralei, the reason, or the way you know that the tzaddik v'ralei, in other words, the incomplete tzaddik she'eini gomor, that he still has, in the most subtle manner, a bit of evil, is because he's not disgusted and abhorred with anything which is opposite than kedusha, than holiness. That's how you know that there's something incomplete with him. As opposed to the tzaddik gomor, the reason why he's a complete tzaddik, and you know that his love to Hashem is absolute, and his love to Hashem is on the highest levels. We use the expression Avad B'tanugim, is total pleasure. And again, he's not only driven to it, but his complete pleasures in God and godliness. Where do you see it? You see it when he has to deal with something which is opposite than God and godliness. The Tzaddik Gomor is abhorrent with it. He's disgusted with it, while the Tzaddik She'eini Gomor, he's not comfortable with it, but you don't see the sino. And here the Alter Rebbe concludes, Ki heim zelu mazeh, because one corresponds to the other. Like David HaMelech said his beautiful pasuk, he says, Tachli, tells the Eibishter, Tachli sina sinesim lo'ivim hayuli. He was dealing with certain people, with a certain movement, with a certain opinion, or something which was, he felt it was disturbing disturbing Hashem's Torah, disturbing Hashem's plan within creation. And he said, he tells Hashem, I have such hatred to these enemies. Chokreini v'dal levavi, Hashem, seek my heart. What is the connection of the first pasuk and the second part of the pasuk? It seems like two different statements. He's telling Hashem, Tachel sinas nesim, I have such hatred to those who oppose you. They hate not only myself, they hate the Torah, and they hate you, Hashem, and therefore I have ultimate hatred to them. And then he says, Hashem, seek and know my heart. But according to what we learned till now, this is the connection is so clear. Because David HaMelech was telling Hashem, seek my heart to know that my heart is completely, have a genuine love to you. How do you know, Hashem, that I have a genuine love to you? Anything which opposes you as an opponent to you, Hashem, I have a complete hatred to. That's how you know, that's how you know that my love to you is genuine. According to the great and fervorous and passionate love the tzaddik has to Hashem, kach, and this works exactly in the same and the simultaneous with, or more so, not only simultaneous in time, but this is a direct expression of it. Kach in the same, based on his passionate love to Hashem. That is the reason why he has a hatred to anything which is opposes God, opposes godliness, and again, Sitra Achra, which is the impure forces, and his disgustedness in Mirah B'Tachlis, in maximum abhorrence to things which are evil, because Amiyus, who Mamash, being disgusting in something, is contrary to true love, Kameasina, just like hatred. And that is this is the Tzaddik Gomor, as opposed to the Tzaddik She'eini Gomor. On the surface, you don't see. Obviously, you're talking with someone who eradicated the evil, wakes up in the morning, his whole drive is to serve Hashem, to daven, to learn, to do another Yid a favor, to be involved in communal work. He's driven. He's a bubble of godliness, that tzaddik, incomplete tzaddik as well. And if you look at both of them, they seem the same on the surface. You can't know, like we said before, the two clean people on the surface, they will do the same thing. The difference of the tzaddik she'eini gomor is when it comes to something which is opposite than God, something which is lamalas tavas haguf bilvad, which is connected to impurity, to the impure spirits. He is not only he doesn't favor it, but he has a feeling of hatred. He's disgusted to it, and again, it's all a result of his pure and genuine love to Hashem. Have a great night.